Tonight, we toast!
Why do you think?
No, it got too big, I guess, got too schizoid, you know? I mean, he thought he fucking was Maxwell Demon in the end, you know? And Maxwell Demon, he thought he was God.
But that's because I was so lost in Ziggy, all that schizophrenia. And he really grew sort of out of proportion, I suppose. Got much bigger than I thought Ziggy was going to be. I didn't ever see Ziggy as big, just overshadowed everything.
Do you feel you've influenced anybody in the...
I think I helped wipe out the 60s.
I knew I should create a sensation.
Extraordinary.
Velvet Goldmine.
Velvet Goldmine, the title of the film, comes from a B-side that David Bowie wrote, a song from the 72.
It's among my favorite music ever composed.
So from the beginning of the movie, there's this enormous sense of loss and of longing for a past that we've forgotten or that we buried. And, you know, yeah, I'm playing it up.
This is a rock and roll movie, you know? It's a movie about music stars and rock and roll stars and parties and the whole band thing.
The sound and the content shared a great deal, which it was extremely ornate and melodic. It was high performance. The music was dressed up. It drew from the threatening anti-hippie sounds of the Velvet Underground and the Stooges, sexual violence that comes from those groups.
I'm the leather-clad kind of, I'm the butchest person in it, you know? So I've got off lightly, but some of it just drives me up the wall. I can't stand it.
Music had makeup.
Some of the stuff that they were doing back then was so radical and so creative, slamming together and trying different ideas. And some of it was, you know, abject failure, but a lot of it was really inspiring.
He was resistant for whatever reason. Ultimately, the fact that it wasn't Bowie's actual music opened it up and let it breathe. What I really believe is that the film is better as a result, and also exposed people to music like Roxy Music and Brian Eno's music and Mark Bolan's music.
The mixture of those elements, the theatricality mixed in with the raunchy, frank sexuality of it all, is apparent in the music itself. You don't even have to listen to the words or understand them, I think, to feel that in the music.
What is the script? You know, it's an incredible piece of writing. It's completely brilliant. So representative of the kind of image we have of the 70s, because it's all over the place. It's mad and it's exciting and beyond comprehension, really, some of it. People talk about scenes, you go, where's that? And then you go back and you read the script and there's a whole scene that you just never went in your mind, you know?
The whole film's loaded with contradictions about itself, as was the era.
And it's really, truly a bisexual love story. It romantically describes the marriage between Brian Slade and Mandy Slade, and Brian's also completely sort of smitten with this character from New York named Kurt Weill.
Kurt was in love with Brian, and Brian was in love with Kurt. It just couldn't mix. Two very, very selfish people.
Massive egos, yeah. His is bigger than mine, though, in terms of character, you know. The relationship's obviously very strong and one that's based in love. And so that makes it, but like a lot of love affairs, it's like over as soon as it started, you know.
And then it's the story of this kid named Arthur from Manchester, who I think maybe we can all identify with the most in the film.
Sort of his glam attraction and everything that went with that. You know, and it's the only period of his life that you can look back on and really sort of see as a happy moment.
It's only now, looking back, I see how you patched through my walls and entered my life in waves.
I wanted to bury the past in the film, and so there would always be this nostalgia and the sense of something dangerous and exciting that was closed up, that Arthur as a character has to sort of dig out.
You're Kurt Weill.
Who the hell are you?
I'm a journalist from the Herald. I was trying to contact you, actually, about a story I was doing about an old friend of yours, Brian Slade. I was trying to find out what actually happened to him.
Look.
I mean, before he became such a mystery.
Look, man, I don't know who you've been talking to or what you're after here.
What?
Listen, a real artist creates beautiful things and puts nothing of his own life into them, okay?
Is that what you did?
No.
We set out to change the world, ended up just changing ourselves.
What's wrong with that?
Nothing, if you don't look at the world.
I was trying to be a one-man revolution.
I think I helped wipe out the 60s.
Good heavens. You've known each other for years, haven't you?
Yeah, for 6 years.
Where did you meet?
What inspired this?
Where did you meet?
In a bar.
In a bar.
In New York. Yeah.
You sure?
We were both unrecognized at the time, so we had a lot to, in common.
But you knew that you were both interested in music.
Yeah.
No, not music, really.
Whatever you call it.
You call it music.
Yeah. This isn't music.
It's nothing to do with punk rock. It sounded like nihilistic rock. It was nihilism, which fascinates me. I love nihilism. Just love philosopher talk.
No, you saw Iggy perform. What was your reaction?
I never saw Iggy perform. I just heard the albums, and then I must admit somebody played me a videotape of a performance that he did. Didn't like it very much because then I saw the violence. It's not what I heard from the lyrics.
We bumbled around America, playing raggedly. Some gigs I could get it together to sing, some I couldn't. Upsetting people wherever we went.
Thank you very much to the person who threw this glass bottle at my head. Nearly killed me, but you missed again. Keep trying next week.
They would all press themselves in groups against the wall as far away as they could get from me, and they'd watch in horror, but they wouldn't be able to leave either. Yeah. They would be sort of fascinated.
I remember the first time I saw Iggy Pop, he was covered with oil and glitter, and everybody was kind of staring at him going, what the hell is this? It was kind of really strange, different.
Yeah, I love this stuff. I like the performance because I want to be a rock star, really.
So he, performed, sang the songs live, and then did these unbelievably strenuous, outrageous performances. Things we've all seen and read about Iggy Pop, with a little bit of Lou Reed thrown in there as well. He just blew us all away.
You poured hot wax on yourself once?
Yes, but that didn't hurt.
It didn't hurt?
No, it doesn't. It just... And I didn't know at the time that it wouldn't hurt, though.
One of the first times you see me in the movie, I think, where I'm playing this concert, and the audience is mainly hippies, and they're not into what we're doing at all, and then I'm doing my stuff, and they don't like it, and then I egg them on, and they like that even less. And they set fire to me and all that kind of stuff. Oh yeah, I have to dive into the crowd, and they hold me up, and
There were a couple of girls, big ones. They moved up right in front of the stage, and they just were laying there on their backs, making themselves very comfortable, relaxing. And I got to the edge of the stage, and I did what I'd seen little kids do sometimes when they want attention from their parents. I thought, I'm just going to fall forward. They'll catch me. And they moved. My front teeth, which I've since had repaired, went straight through one of my lips.
At 69, he still gets the urge.
I shouldn't be doing that, but every once in a while, spirit.
I thought you'd given up stage diving.
Well, I gave it up here, but not here.
It's kind of action glam. Schwarzenegger meets T-Rex, maybe.
He turned his attention to two of the artists who had been a huge influence on his music for Ziggy. The first was Velvet Underground's Lou Reed.
We'd never heard of Iggy Pop, we'd never heard of Lou Reed. Bowie revealed those to us. They become part of Bowie's coterie, so we wanted to listen to them.
Never heard anything quite like it. It was a revelation to me. Well, I don't know why he's doing music. This music's as bad as his painting. I thought, I'm gonna like this.
And he wanted to disturb people. It was incredible images, very simple language. I thought a rock and roll song that contained that kind of language would be just fantastic.
But there were elements of what Lou was doing that I thought were just unavoidably right for both the times and for where music was going. One of it was the use of background noise.
At the end of the show, if I could call it a show, we got into feedback. We were all leaning guitars and everything, against the amps, and it made this wall of feedback. And we left the stage.
to create a kind of an ambience that had been hitherto unknown in rock, I think.
Pushed the boundaries of rock and roll by exploring themes of unconventional sex, cross-dressing, and social unrest.
It influenced what I was to do for the next few years.
The Velvets were considered too extreme at the time ever to achieve commercial success, and one by one the members of the band went separate ways.
In the summer of 1972, alongside Mick Ronson, Bowie produced Lou Reed's Transformer album. It's still Lou's most successful album to date.
The brilliant thing about his friendship with Lou Reed is that Lou Reed was successful before he came along. I'll take you under my wing. I'm going to turn you, Lou Reed, into a pop star in the UK. Really clever.
A few months later, Bowie was at the mixing desk for Iggy Pop and the Stooges' Raw Power.
David was drawn to Iggy's wild nature. And in time, Bowie would incorporate aspects of the American avant-garde into his own work.
There was something with Jimmy that I hadn't seen in rock and roll. Animalistic kinds of rock that you never really see. It's always usually safeguarded and very, very safe.
My music is just basically, I look for things to tear apart, you know, and, oh, that's good to whip, you know.
I'm lucky because the stuff I'm doing is kind of rock.
It probably has nothing to do with rock and roll. I think it has more to do with method. Very spontaneous kind of lyric. It's not like a written thing at all with Jimmy. Whereas mine is I spend months writing one word. Yeah. Then I have to look it up and see how to spell it.
You recorded Iggy first, or Jimmy first?
No. Iggy already had 2 albums out on his own that he'd done himself. General favour went against Jim because of what he was doing at the time. It seemed. But
Would you describe some of the things you were doing?
I was doing songs like "I Want to Be Your Dog" and "No Fun" and "Search and Destroy" and "Raw Power," which has since had a child's toy named after it. And
but you were doing things to yourself physically that were.
Yeah, and to other people too.
Why?
Because I was bored and angry. Something that demanded action every day would keep pestering my mind, and I couldn't do anything about it. Finally, sometimes I would give up and just resort to simple violence.
On yourself, though, mostly?
Usually on myself, because I hated to do it, take it out on other people. I thought that was wrong.
That's considerate.
Yeah, I thought I was, no, honestly, I thought I was being more considerate.
Drug problems and drinking and general carousing. You know, I was a street person in L.A., basically, and I'd been kind of stymied by the entire music business and a really disastrous manager in general. And it was really timely that he suggested basically 2 things: getting out of L.A., which is great, and making an album together.
Do you want to come to London to cut a record?
Oh, yeah, cool.
What do you need?
Everything. See, Harold was my main man. You come here and say you want to help, and I say, hey, far out. You could be my main man.
It was pretty clear what was happening, but for the world to think it was happening, that was Jerry's particular genius.
The collaboration that Jimmy and I have had has been something because I was intoxicated with what I thought Jimmy stood for. I would never, ever want it to be considered that I was some kind of hand manipulator or Svengali behind what Jimmy's doing now. Because he's getting popular now, it's only because he's 6 years too early. What he was doing 6 years ago was just the same.
You're talking musically?
Nothing, musically, and his presence, what he was doing on stage was exactly the same. It's just that I happen to be concerned with it now, because I stayed with it.
Had he not come along with that proposal, I probably wouldn't be talking to you.
My career was on the skids, mate, and you fished me out of the muck. You got me back on my feet, you did. It was nothing, chum. I wanted to help you make more of that far-out sound. I love your music, my son, and I love... You don't have to say it, mate.
Do it to this extent, but you are now helping to produce Jimmy's albums.
Yeah.
Give me anything.
Cut it.
And I'll set you.
Kurt, we only ask that when you decide to make a change, you simply inform us in advance so Eaton here is properly prepared. Otherwise...
What the fuck are you talking about, man? I didn't make any fucking change.
Do you mind me talking?
No.
You sure?
Yeah.
Okay. In the studio, Jimmy would make up the lyrics on the spot,
and we would keep everything that he did, and occasionally change a line after we recorded. But Jimmy, I've never seen anybody be able to make up lyrics so fast, just out of his head.
Your music.
I'm a cyborg. My stuff is very different. Mine comes from sort of up to from there, and Jimmy's comes from about here down to. Ooh.
Iggy was a big influence, and of course Iggy became Ziggy, but no one had gone that extra bit and made their performance a piece of concept art.
Wish I thought of it.
You will, love. You will.
I would try and get involved in anything that I felt was a useful tool for an artistic medium.
Bowie met Lindsay Kemp, who specialised in avant-garde theatre.
I was endeavouring to teach him to astonish.
Shocking was what he wanted to be, and shocking was what he was.
But in 1970, rock audiences bred on Creedence Clearwater and the Beatles were not entirely sure what to make of this particular brand of revolt.
Bowie had shown the world a glimpse of his extraordinary talent. A masterful piece of songwriting.
Space Oddity was heard repeatedly in Britain during the week Neil Armstrong walked on the moon. And David was ecstatic, but the song quickly slid down the charts.
Bowie became increasingly worried he was damned to be a one-hit wonder.
1970, he was fundamentally depressed.
But by taking a controversial approach to performing, the singer's career would soon be launched into a whole new orbit.
And that, in part, came from Bowie's bride-to-be, Angie Barnett.
And there in the centre of it was Brian's American wife, Mandy, whose dramatic transformation into London party girl was a constant source of amusement.
Brian Slade!
People generally aren't good with change, I don't think.
She had to be his door kicker. She also had to watch him do whatever he wants to do.
Because someone sees, you know, two naked people asleep in bed together, it doesn't necessarily prove sex was involved. It does, however, make for a very strong case.
They both wanted to kind of be out there, you know.
I wanted everything shiny and everyone beautiful, and I wanted them to jump out, so they popped. I just thought, wouldn't that be better than people in jeans?
The beauty reveals everything.
She was a very foot-forward American girl who was larger than life in her approach.
Angela was really a driving force behind David. She was very influential with the costumes. She made him brave. She would have a haircut first if she didn't think he would like it. She made him brave.
And in February 1970, he unleashed a radical new image. His makeup and costumes predate Mark Bolan's first glam rock TV appearance by over a year.
David formed a new group with a tongue-in-cheek name, The Hype.
It's the first time David Bowie worked with Mick Ronson, the guitarist who would become part of the sound of Ziggy Stardust. 3 albums in, and Bowie was still failing to find his audience.
Today you're a talented singer. I can make you a star.
And said, I'm Tony DeFries and I'm going to make you a star. I said, oh yeah.
And that meant cracking America.
Who would you most fancy meeting in America?
Brian? Who?
Kurt Wilde.
It was during this period that Bowie was introduced to the subversive world of Andy Warhol and the Velvet Underground.
And he said, you're not going to like this one. I said, why? Because it's more rock and roll. It's going to be more like, I can't remember if he said Iggy Pop and the Stooges or Velvet Underground. It wouldn't have mattered because I didn't know of either of those acts at that point anyway.
The Velvet Underground influence can clearly be heard on Queen Bitch, the one track on Hunky Dory that links the album to Ziggy Stardust. When Bowie performed on BBC's Old Grey Whistle Test in February 1972, he might have played songs from Hunky Dory, but the transformation into his alien alter ego had already started.
I felt really comfortable going on stage as somebody else. And it seemed a rational decision to keep on doing that.
Man is least himself when he talks in his own person. Give him a mask and he'll tell you the truth.
Maxwell Demon is the story of a space creature who becomes a rock and roll messiah, only to be destroyed by his own success. Are you saying this is your destiny? Are you Maxwell Demon?
A strange alien creature was beamed onto our television screens. With bright red hair and multicoloured spacesuit, his unearthly appearance shocked the nation. But for many teenagers who experienced this televisual visitation, it would change their lives forever.
Starman rising in the sky. He'd like to come and meet us, but he thinks he blew our minds.
This messianic Martian was with us only for a year, but his impact would be felt for generations to come. Music on planet Earth would never be the same. He'd drawn on nearly a decade of experience to create the record that would finally make him famous. And this time, he got it spot on. Ziggy turned Bowie into stardust.
Baby's on fire, so bewitching. Rescuers row, row. Do your best to change the subject.
David going down on mixed guitar. Revelation. When my mother saw that paper, I said, oh, they're just pretending, Mum.
I mean, it's hard to shock anybody nowadays, but in those days, that was still a shocking image, you know. The overtone of him, like, filleting Mick Ronson's guitar, that got a lot of people at it. And, of course, getting people at it was part of the design.
Mick Rock shot the iconic album cover.
He was trying to whisper something into Lou's ear, but to take it from me, there was a big wet kiss went on that night. And why not?
But it doesn't really matter much what a man does with his life. What matters is the legend that grows up around him.
It was a real gesture when he put his arm around the guitarist. It was a very sexual thing.
Rock music has always been a reaction to accepted standards.
That the singer in the multicoloured jumpsuit might not be entirely heterosexual.
What about your fans? Aren't they likely to get the wrong impression?
And which wrong impression is that?
Well, you're a blinking fruit.
Well, thank you, sir, and no. It doesn't concern me in the least. I should think that if people were to get the wrong impression of me, the one to which you so eloquently referred, it wouldn't be the wrong impression in the slightest.
That is me! That's me, that's me!
I said, "Are you gay?" And he said, "Yes." He said, "I have been ever since I was David Jones," which was his real name.
To go that extra mile and say I'm gay was so outrageous.
The impression that you were married and living in North London with your
I am married. Quite happily, in fact. I just happen to like boys as much as I like girls, and since it's my wife, feels pretty much the same about such things.
I didn't feel anything about it. We're trying to get publicity. We're trying to sell albums. I didn't even read the bloody thing. I went, good, 3 pages. You did well.
When you're making huge amounts of money, there's corporations financing you. The contradictions of that direct statement from the heart, by the time it gets into the hands of the kids out there, whatever, is so contradicted, I think, at so many levels, that when you set out to sort of tell the truth, I think you always fail.
And even from Bowie himself, he said about the film afterwards, Todd Haynes sort of made, you know, kind of put a gay slant on glam rock, and I'm like, oh, I give that full credit for that. When you were brilliantly mincing up and down the stage or going down on Mick Ronson's guitar, I think you were the groundbreaker. You know, whatever he really did behind closed doors, it was a bisexual imagination that he was putting out there, which makes both straight people and gay people uncomfortable.
Everybody knows most people are bisexual.
Thanks to Slade, today's youngsters are singing a whole new tune.
So you're saying you're bisexual?
Yeah, I like boys, I like girls. They're all great. No difference, is there, Mr. BBC?
Into this scene because it's supposedly the thing to do right now, but you just can't fake being gay. You know, if you're gonna claim that you're gay, you're gonna have to make love in gay style, and most of these kids just aren't gonna make it. That line, everyone's bisexual, it's a very popular thing to say right now, but personally, I think it's meaningless.
Let me put my arms around your head. Gee, it's hot. Let's go to bed.
I love all that stuff. I love the idea of anything going and the bisexuality being hip, but at the same time, I think there was a lot of hypocrisy in it, and people saying they were gay and bisexual who weren't, and you know, it was just a hip scene to be in. Whereas the people that were leading it truthfully, and we are gay and we are bisexual, and they were the cool people.
Excuse me, fellas.
I raise a glass to the loveliest man in Europe.
And they tell you it's not natural.
The
world has changed because you are made of ivory and gold. The curves of your lips rewrite history.
Imagine that liberation of mind for the first time. How those kids just went mad. We can be anything we want to be. We wear makeup and we can wear anything we want to be, and people think we're cool. It's like a fantasy world.
I was born in '71, so I kind of missed it. As a time where anything went, that's an incredibly powerful and positive thing. And now it's not the case anymore, you know. We really have jumped backwards, I think. Still, we shouldn't all wear flares and flowery shirts because we do look ridiculous, so I'm glad we got out of that.
And then I've created this bloody thing. How do I sort of get out of it?
You are contractually bound to finish the Maxwell Demon tour as Maxwell Demon.
This superstar is killed by his own fans. Rock and roll suicide. He's eaten alive by their energy that he's fed them with. It was a brilliant idea.
Just before the final song, David Bowie approached the microphone and with a few words broke the hearts of millions.
Of all the shows on this tour, this particular show will remain with us the longest because not only is it the last show of the tour, but it's the last show that we'll ever do. Thank you.
We all went, oh, what the fuck's he all about? No. Quite shocked. And I kept looking at Woody, and Woody was like playing away, going, I don't know what's going on, you know.
Now I hope it's forever.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye, we love you.
Those people who are lead singers and stand alone, they have to change, you know, they can't do the same show every time. But it's a brilliant calculation because not many people would have the wits or the knowledge or the intelligence to do that.
You're always so charming.
Of the Thin White Duke, as he's been called, David Bowie's tour, 83, it was a major staging and security colossus.
6 full-size rigs and 3 charter planes and transport. What can I say? I think big.
Allegations connecting you with bisexual pop singer Brian Slade, who staged his own assassination 10 years ago this week in London.
I'm very happy with Ziggy. I think he was a very successful character, and I think I played him very well. But I'm glad I'm me now.
You have been working with Iggy now, and you're a very modest man. You're sitting there at the keyboard. But what happens with your career?
Oh, that's fine. I am very rich, you know. I can afford it, but I prefer to do something that really excites me, and playing piano behind Iggy Pop for me is very exciting.
Bowie played keyboards behind Iggy on tour that year.
He'd done some really creative work on The Idiot as a musician for me. Basically, it says Iggy Pop and his band. Most of his band is just David Bowie overdubbing himself. He was nicer to me than he had to be. That is a super rare thing with a Hig, huge industry giant.
Bowie and Iggy would collaborate on more than 3 albums of material, including this song. While working with Brian Eno and sharing an apartment with Iggy Pop, he began to focus on minimalist, ambient music for the first of 3 albums, co-produced with Tony Visconti, later known as the Berlin Trilogy.
Low sold poorly, but rather than scrapping his experimental new style, David made 2 more LPs which were also intended to break the pop music mold, Lodger and Heroes. The title track from Heroes became a hit for David.
Nothing will keep us together.
It's inspired by the Velvet Underground track, I'm Waiting for the Man.
I'm waiting for my man.
Heroes failed to soar and did not even make the US Billboard Hot 100.
The audience to whom you appeal, they will move to another group.
I think Jimmy and I believe in our audiences a lot. I don't think we're concerned very much. I don't see the necessity of doing a tour of my own until I want to do one.
Thank you, Transelectric and CRA, Micro Atlanta, and Dupree for their generous support. 3 billion viewers tuning in right now. To the children of the world. Become the heroes. Just one take.
Bowie's performance of Heroes on June the 6th, 1987 in West Berlin was considered a catalyst to the later fall of the Berlin Wall.
Powerful performance that brought music fans in East Berlin close to the wall so they could listen. Heroes became the anthem of the divided city.
And upon his death in January 2016, the German government said, "Goodbye, David Bowie. You are now among heroes. Thank you for helping to bring down the wall." Heroes the song may have had a rough start, but the album as a whole, however, garnered much more favourable reviews and is considered by many to be the best of the Berlin trilogy. It's gone on to become one of David Bowie's most recognisable songs.
The rest of the decade saw Bowie in a creative frenzy, producing 7 groundbreaking albums in just as many years. He was to the 70s what the Beatles were to the 60s.
Rebel Rebel is David Bowie's most covered tracks. Dead or Alive, Def Leppard, Bay City Rollers, Bryan Adams, Duran Duran, Ricky Lee Jones have all covered this track.
I'm just by nature a very flighty person, but I get turned on and off things all the time very quickly.
Throughout his decade-spanning career, he had a number of top 20 albums and singles that were performed by the different personas he adopted: Ziggy Stardust, the Thin White Duke, and the kimono-wearing Aladdin Sane. Each of these fearless phases in the 70s sparked a number of subgenres, including punk, new wave, goth rock, the new romantics, and electronica.
But for many, it's Ziggy Stardust for which he'll be best remembered.
It's so iconic. You can track pop culture from that very point, and it all leads back to Ziggy Stardust.
If you look at someone like Lady Gaga, her whole act, it's Bowie, it's Ziggy Stardust. Okay, she's put a 21st century slant on it, but she's not really doing anything that Bowie didn't do 40 years ago.
You look at punk, and basically they're more monochromatic, more aggressive versions of the Ziggy construct.
We're following, in some way, in the footsteps of people like David. Suddenly it would need the provision of a musical sound to go with this look. And we called them the Sex Pistols.
Review of the Sex Pistols in NME.
Yeah, for this band in London who do Stooges songs.
Nobody did Stooges songs.
They do a version of No Fun. And we thought, oh.
No fun, my babe. No fun.
Nobody ever said they liked Iggy and the Stooges. You just didn't admit to that in 1970 unless you were cross-dressing or on some sort of drugs or had just dropped out of life or high school, really.
Iggy sort of claimed, as far as he knew, he didn't sell any records until he came to New York and met this newer generation of, like, the Ramones, who were completely informed by the Stooges, which I think was shocking for him.
The Stooges weren't commercially successful, but they were influential.
Near to truth, as near as my memory can concoct. Hep rock and roll is all about, which means a small hunting and gathering group, anthropologically speaking, right? Of young men who get together out of nothing else but sheer desperation and go for it in a small town. That's how all rock and roll starts. And everybody knows this, from the Stones down, right? With the Stooges, luckily we never made it past that. That's why we make a good book. That's why we're not a band anymore.
Today it's considered as a massive inspiration for the punk rock movement.
Well, punk rock, explain to me what it is. David? David?
Well, it's not... my understanding of punk rock is something that's happened in England, I think, really over the last couple of years. But what Jimmy was doing... This isn't me. It's nothing to do with punk rock.
I want to belong to the glam people, alternative people, to any of it. I don't want to be a punk. I just want to be.
Give me danger, little stranger, and I'll heal your disease.
Punk rock wasn't even a thought at that time, but the seeds for punk were certainly being sown by the Dolls, the MC5, and by all the bands that had come previous to that, the Velvets and Stooges.
That sort of marks the point where glam rock died and punk rock started.
Let's go! Well, I think when punk rock was ushered in, it was a little bit more of a sexless musical revolution. Of course, it was incredibly sexy in its own way, but I think politically, things just changed dramatically, you know, in the mid-'70s.
The influences, English punk scene, were homegrown, really.
Kind of glam bands like Ziggy Stardust, which is David Bowie and the Spiders from Mars.
The two bands dominated the punk scene in 1977, yet they looked like they'd just jumped out of the audience.
DIY was really integral to punk's DNA. Anybody could have a bash, and that included women. You never really saw that many females on stage making music until punk.
In 1988, David Bowie surprised everyone when he formed a new act called Tin Machine.
It wasn't heavy metal. It was just David Bowie once again reinventing rock and roll. I think his response to what later would become alternative rock.
80s music wouldn't have happened if it hadn't been for Bowie. Makeup was where we started. Dressing up was where we started.
Heavy metal boys, shave your head and wear a dress.
Nirvana was a breath of fresh air. I saw them in the Pyramid here in New York City, about 60 people in the room. And I thought, oh dear, that boy's got the shit. I thought Smells Like Teen Spirit was just a very powerful track. Months later, there was, you know, Kurt, you know.
I laughed and shook the sound, made my way back home. I searched for form around.
It's a very sad rendition, of course, because it's so tied up with his own life and death. So it takes on all these different shades for me. Because I also remember fairly clearly my state of mind when I was actually writing it, as near to a mystical state that a 19-year-old can get into. It really had two mystical states, the time that I wrote it and recorded it, and the time when he wrote it. When he wrote it again, when he recorded it, and the things that led up to his end after that. So I guess it still retains for me a sense of the mystical.
Yesterday, upon the stair, I saw a man that wasn't there. He wasn't there again today. How I'd wish he'll go away.
We passed upon the stairs. He said I was his friend. As I thought we died alone.
It brought home to me, as many things have in my maturity, the fact that this is a very dangerous business. Very dangerous for the practitioners.
That same decade, pop culture finally began to embrace Iggy. He had his biggest radio hit. And his music was featured in the 1996 film Trainspotting.
Are you conscious of the influence of your band?
Minor spiritual influence. I went to the Fillmore in New York, and there were 4 guys on stage with no shirt on, and they all looked like me, and it was the Red Hot Chili Peppers. You know, and I thought, oh, how do I compete with that? Here comes success. This century's been a fresh start for me. The simplest thing I would think is that maybe society and I met halfway. I'm still not sure what the civilized world wants to do about me. I'm not sure what their intentions are.
Hi, everybody!
See you around. Cheers.
Now Ziggy play guitar, jamming good with Weir and Gilly and Spiders from Mars.
David set the terms of his exit. No public memorial, just the art that he created, as uncompromised and invested in the future as ever.
Don't know what I was waiting for. Time was running wild. A million dead-end streets, and every time I thought I'd got it made, it seemed the taste was not so sweet. Change it.